Like, is it weird to hear people talk about your success?
It's not weird. Because I don't really think about it from a bird's eye view like that. I don't think about it. I don't talk about it that often with my team or with people. I don't hear it talked about from that perspective of like a whole career or like the past decade. It's always like the last album or this specific moment, or it's always like within the context of like that day or that month or that album cycle at most. It's never within that broader context. So it was like refreshing. I was like, oh, wow. Oh, yeah. It has been an eclectic kind of fearless career.
The fact that it's over a decade is pretty shocking to me.
It's
I
crazy.
think that's where, all of us keep our heads down. We're all doing our sessions. We're all doing.
Yeah.
You don't really look up, like you were saying. You don't look up and see what 12 years
I know.
of releasing music is.
It's so true, because I feel like also we're always just thinking about, what's the next thing and that kind of motion. But it's important just for yourself to contextualize and to take a moment to be like, that's why I think I love memoirs, and I love like, the idea of, I mean, this is totally random segue, but the idea of like, I don't know, one day maybe like writing one just for, not for other people, but just for myself to like just contextualize your life and get out of like the kind of close up zoomed in view and more of, oh wow, how did this day, this moment come to be, and look at it from that like broader lens.
Do you journal?
It's so funny that you say that, because this morning I felt like there's different phases of my life where sometimes I feel like I process feelings through talking to someone, like whether it's like a therapist or talking to my mom or talking to a friend. And lately, and then there's other times where I will write stuff down in my notes. Like if I'm feeling really stressed, I will just like write things down on my iPad or my notes. And this morning I was like, I need to get a journal and just like pen to paper, write stuff down. I don't know. It's the first time I've really felt like that. Because before I felt like it was almost like writing pen to paper felt frustrating, because I felt like I
actually use it. Yeah. Do you when you're going through this idea of jotting down ideas, do you see yourself starting when you were saying the memoir part of your life? Like what point in your life can you start telling the story of you?
It's so, I feel really lucky that even now I'm like, I have so many things that I want to do. And I'm like, oh, I have ideas for, I'm not like a whole, maybe like album idea, even though I do have thoughts that will come in and be like, wow, this sonically would be a really cool direction. This visually, thematically would be a really cool direction. But, even in like the past week, I'll write down like, this is a song that I feel like is important, like conceptually, storyline wise. And then I actually have like started writing like kind of essay ideas. I write like maybe like a few every day. Because I do feel like I'm kind of old enough now where from the beginning of my life to now, I feel like there is, I don't know, there's like a cool kind of like essay book in there.
So let's start from the beginning a little bit. Obviously there's a lot of information about you in the universe, and I know you've done other podcasts and whatnot, but let's just pretend that our listeners don't know some of the earliest parts. You are born in Cuba.
Yes.
To your mom and dad.
Yeah. So and my mom and dad, who you just met. My dad is from Mexico. My mom is from Cuba. Mm-hmm. And they met in Mexico because my mom, when she was around 25, moved to Mexico, just like her and her cousin. And that's where she met my dad. And then she got pregnant with me. Then they got married. And then from when I was born till I was about 7 years old, I moved back and forth from Cuba to Mexico. And then when I was 7, my mom and I went to Miami.
Why?
Well, I think Mexico at that time didn't feel super safe for us. And Cuba felt like it was like the beginning of the demise. And, I have a lot of family there now, and it's just like, it's so tragic what's going on there now. Like I have family members who, you know, like I have like cousins who are like going to Hialeah to like send medicine because
Crazy.
people are like sick and there's no medicine in the hospitals, and you know, like just like lack of food, lack of medicine, lack of everything. So I think it was kind of like the beginning of that, and beginning to see that there was like such an obvious ceiling in terms of education and opportunities and more practical stuff like food and power outages and,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
stuff like that. So I think she had already known before she even had me a few years before that, you know, wasn't a place that she had kind of like become disillusioned with what her country was becoming. And that's why at 25, she went to Mexico. But then Mexico felt like it also kind of, it wasn't the right place. And so she was like, okay, I think I'm just going to do it. And I think she had something like $500 or something. And we went to Miami and stayed at it was my godmother's place for like a month. And my mom started like working at Marshall's, and she was an architect, and she just, you know, kind of like hustled her way to becoming an architect again. And my dad met us a year and a half later. Yeah, and then I like learned English like pretty quickly. I was like 7. And one story that I think is really interesting is like my first name, like so many of my friends from school call me Carla because, because
Still? Do they still call you that?
Yes, because my family always called me Camila, but my first name was legally always Carla. But I think, I don't know, something about like, I don't know if this was just for me, but maybe like, I feel like in Latin American countries, it's not, I didn't go to school where it was like a computer system where it's like first name, blah, blah, blah. It's just like, what's your name? And then like you say your name. But I, like, you know, going to school, they were like Carla, and I was like, present, but I didn't really speak very good English. So I was kind of like too shy to be like, I'd actually prefer if you call me Camila. That's what my family calls me. So literally from elementary school to when I went on an audition for X Factor, everybody called me Carla. And I remember always like not feeling like identified with that name. And my parents always calling me Camila. So it's almost like a very like metaphorical, like kind of identity, like
It's your
crisis. You know what I mean?
It's your alter ego.
Yeah, totally.
Do you keep in touch with people from your childhood?
Yeah. I have friends that I like still hang out with like all the time.
My dad's an architect. My grandpa's an architect.
Oh, really?
And one of the things that we talk a lot about as a songwriter is how similar they are. And
Interesting.
What's a little different in your case is that you're also sort of the builder and the person who lives in the house.
Yes.
If you're using the same metaphor. But I do think that there's so many similarities to
Totally. I
being,
never thought about that.
the blueprint and like how you interpret, how you're going to dress up the house once you build it is something different. But I definitely can see where you'd get, the songwriting background, even just seeing how somebody creates something from nothing, even if you're given like, this is your plot of land, that nobody's plots of land, nothing's flat. So you have to be creative in the way that you design a house that is flat. So you're not living in a weird place, like all these weird things you don't think about, but when you grow up with an architect, you see like the ingenuity it takes to do what looks like a normal house on a plot of land that isn't normal. So like, I think that there's a lot of similarity in that, the influence of music in Cuba and in Mexico and in Miami, they're similar, but they're really, if you're into it, they're not that.
No, not at all.
They're really different. They're very diverse. What are your first musical memories in your childhood?
Well, first of all, the architect parallels, I'm so curious to, because I never thought about it that way.
I think what's like,
when you think
I'm
about,
trying to explain to my parents what I do for a living still.
and that's like totally.
So it's one of those things that I'm always trying to help when I was in bands for years, right? Yeah. Used to be in bands with, like, this is the same era. That's when I met like Ricky Reed. He was in Wallpaper, and I'm in like Glacier Hiking. Which we'll get to later. But this.
I was a big fan of some Wallpaper songs.
Oh yeah, just the best.
Yes.
And it was the time where when I started really primarily writing for other people, my dad was so used to seeing me on stage that he didn't understand. Even when I'd get him tickets to go see huge artists singing these songs, he was like, yeah, but you were an artist. I was like, yeah, but I'm still an artist. I'm just not playing for 300 people a night. Now the songs are being played in stadiums around the world. You know, like,
Yeah.
it's like, I
Now
just
this
don't
house
need-
is on Architectural Digest.
Yeah, right. And I don't, and maybe I just don't have to be the guy who builds the house.
That's
too.
interesting. I actually started songwriting in that way too, where, and you asked me about the Cuba Mexico thing, but just to detour for a second, I wanted to start writing songs like for other people while I was in the group. Like we were working with like Julian Bonetta.
Yeah.
And I remember being like, I used to write to instrumentals of other songs because I didn't know like how to play an instrument. So I would write basically my own song over like, you know, piano chords to like whatever, like
Sure.
Ed Sheeran
Whatever.
song, whatever.
Yeah.
You know, like 4 chords and like write a new song. And my exercise was always like, oh, pretend like you would write a song for Rihanna, pretend like you would blah, blah, blah. And I would like send them to him and he would give me notes. But I started actually wanting to write for other people. And then I would get so attached to the house. I was just like, I actually just want to live in the house. And I actually, sometimes I do want to write for other people and I still feel like I would get too attached to the house.
I think one of the interesting parts of that is that no matter how far you go, you still can envision yourself.
That's so interesting.
You still can envision yourself in the house.
Yourself in the house.
You're like,
yes.
I'm gonna write this Rihanna song. You're like, I mean,
But
it
like,
doesn't
damn,
not
that would sound
like,
good.
It doesn't
Yeah.
not sound like me. And you
Yeah,
try to
totally.
explain to artists who are like, yeah, these songs sound too far apart. They don't belong on the same album. And some of it's like, maybe that's true, but with your voice on both of the songs being outside of your body,
I always
seem
think
like
that's true.
You know,
I always think like when something is genuine, it's like the through line is you.
yeah,
That's
totally.
the through line. It's you. But anyway, but yeah, no, Cuban and Mexican like music is so different. I feel like there was crossover, and then at the same time there was you know, there was definitely, it was like almost like a Venn diagram. Like I do feel like I grew up listening to a lot of like Latin top 40. So where like now I'll go on like playlists and it'll be like early 2000s Latin music.
Yeah.
And there are songs that I don't even know if they were just like the songs that were playing in my house. And
Yeah.
what's funny is like in Miami, I feel like Latin radio stations still, like I feel like those are still kind of the glory days. Like they still go back to that time of music. But yeah, we listened to a lot of just like what was popular at the time. And then there's obviously like the icons of like Luis Miguel and Vicente Fernandez and like Mexican like pop rock like Maná and Camila. And like then like for Cuban music, obviously like Celia Cruz and like a lot of like the big like salsa songs at the time. Like, you know, I remember like Familia with Ricky, like I pulled up so many of the songs that I like listened to in my childhood. Like Bam Bam was inspired by this song that is like my family song called Un Millón de Estrellas by Polo Montañez, which was like a big song in Cuba that was like, it was like this guy who was like literally like a farmer in Cuba, and he had like a couple big songs, and then he actually like I think died like at a really early age. Like it wasn't even like a big like pop star thing.
Yeah.
And like the music video was him literally walking around his farm.
It's so good.
I know, yeah. But yeah, definitely like, yeah. And then I remember also like loving like Shakira with her black hair. Like singer-songwriter Shakira was like so big for me.
But there's a difference between listening to a lot of different music and then feeling like this is a house I can live in. I'm just gonna do this metaphor forever.
No,
But
I love it. No, I love that. It's so true.
You know, you're listening to all that music, and what makes your career interesting is how eclectic it all becomes. Before the X Factor stuff, were you ever recording your own stuff yet? Like when were you first thinking, okay, you know what?
No.
I actually want to do this before I go and do this audition. I really think I should be a singer, and I think I should sound like,
No,
you know.
definitely not. I mean, I played in so many different houses for sure. Like I sang like so many different kinds of music.
In the
like,
house or in public? Were you
and
singing?
by the way, that house thing was also just a metaphor. I played in so many different houses. I
Yeah.
mean, like, like I listened
Yeah.
to so much like early to that, like, Chris Brown and like Neo and like a lot of like that era of like, 2000s, like
Yeah.
pop R&B and like whatever. And I feel like that informed a lot of my like singing. And like, how I remember like being in drama class and my drama teacher would be like, can you just like not riff like so much? Not in like a weird way, but I didn't have like a vibrato. Like I sang stuff in a very poppy like way and I would like riff and like do runs and stuff. And he was like, girl, like this is like, this is like Hello Dolly. Like, well, what are we doing? What was the question? I don't remember.
No, but
what you were asking.
I really like where you're going with this on some level because I'm a musical theater dork, and so it's like it's nice to hear. I feel like a lot of people kind of closet their musical theater background, and here you're openly Hello Dolly. When you were growing up, were you doing a lot of musical theater? Did you think that's what you would do?
I wouldn't say I was like a musical theater nerd. I think that drama class was just my entry into like the arts
singing
and into the singing.
Yeah. So take us to this, like, this is so old now, but you go to the audition for X Factor. What were your goals going into it? Were you thinking, I want to be a pop star and here's this opportunity?
No, I actually started, I think it was like maybe a year before I started uploading like covers to YouTube. But
where were you recording these in your like bedroom?
Yeah, in my bedroom. And I would, a lot of the times I didn't want people from school like seeing them. So I would like cover the camera. So it would be just like literally like a black screen. And I'd be like singing like If I Ain't Got You by Alicia Keys. And then I would like listen to it and then I would delete it because I felt like, oh man, like I messed up or whatever. It's not good enough, blah, blah, blah. I would like upload another one, then I would delete it. I really regret deleting those now because it would just be so fun to listen to them. I kept one, which was Skyscraper by Demi Lovato. And I had the camera on for that one. But I think it was,
and that's still, can someone find that?
Yeah, that's still on there. But it was interesting because I think it's funny because I've been thinking a lot like now at 27 and, it all kind of ties into what we were first talking about, like just like contextualizing your life and your personality. And, it feels like there were so many different kind of like sides to me and so many different, on one level, I remember like I went to visit my grandma in Cuba when she was still living there. And I was like, had this obsession with music and singing, but I felt so shy to sing in front of my family, to sing in front of my parents. So I made her get in the closet and I played guitar and sang for her. And so it was like, that was me with my family on one level. And then
what did she say to you?
She was like, wow, like I can't like super remember, but she'll say to me now, like, I can't believe like this is you now. And like, do you remember when you made me like get in the closet because you didn't want me to look at you? And so I think like, so that was one.
Where did the nerves come from?
I don't know. Like, it's like so interesting. I think I was just like, I've always been like kind of like, there were parts of me that were really shy and I, felt really shy when like, I don't know, like there's like a picture of me like with my eyes like tearing up when people sang me happy birthday. Like I think I was just like overly kind of sensitive. I don't really know. This is, some stuff I'm figuring out.
Do you have brothers and sisters?
So my sister came like 10 years, she's 10 years younger than me. So I was kind of raised a little bit only childish vibes.
Yeah.
And then also I think that, to be honest, like not to whatever make it like deep, but I think the immigrant stuff is like kind of weird. And like, do you know what I mean? I didn't have like, my family didn't start coming over to Miami until really recently. Like, like extended family and cousins and whatever, like not till really recently. So it was very like kind of nuclear and a little bit isolated.
My family were the immigrants because I was the second generation American. You know
Where
what I mean?
from?
Like, well, my family is European,
Okay,
and
cool.
during the war, they wouldn't. They tried to come to the U.S., but the U.S. wouldn't let in Jews,
Wow.
so they moved to Nicaragua, which is why
Wow.
that blueprint on the wall is my grandfather for when above the piano is the blueprint on the wall
Oh,
is in
wow.
Spanish because
Wow.
my family lived in Nicaragua.
Wow.
To get into the U.S., they had to basically
Right.
come in. The thing was, you'd come into the U.S. when you were pregnant and have a
Wow.
kid here, so that way you could
Wow.
stay.
Wow.
So that was my mom.
Crazy.
You know, there's
Crazy.
There was a warrant out for my grandma because she had stayed here for too long. But that was even just that, like, made me feel there's some immigrant.
Like self-consciousness or.
Mine, I think, is ambition.
Oh yeah.
I think I have the
100%.
immigrant ambitions that I think there's this need to prove that I belong in
Yeah.
a way that I got from looking at all my cousins speaking. Everyone spoke a different language, and you knew where they lived with whatever family member by the language in which they fought. Like they would fight
Wow.
if they fought in Hungarian, that was my grandparents. If they fought
Wow.
in Spanish, it'd
Wow.
be like my mom's cousins. If it
Wow.
was if it's like my godparents, it might have been in Hebrew or something. It was like everyone
Wow.
fought in some language that wasn't, you could
What a
tell when they got
tapestry.
mad. That's when the realness came out.
Wow.
Anyway, that's a long story about me and not you, but like
I was thinking of just like a beautiful like tapestry.
it is.
But I was just gonna say like, and thank you for sharing that because that's really cool.
Yeah.
But I feel like it was interesting because, and maybe you can help me sort this out because it was like on one hand I was, doing kind of very like shy, self-conscious things like that, and then on the other hand in school, it was like all of my friendships were based on music and singing.
Yeah.
So it was like, my friends from literally my first friend who was actually from Nicaragua, that I made in like the apartment complex that we were living in. We would like put on like the Cheetah Girls and pretend like we were in a girl group. And then, I'd be in elementary school and we would like be playing American Idol and I would bring my CD and they'd be like, oh my God, like, can you sing for us like one more time? And I'd be like, kind of
And
like.
what song was it? Always the
Breaking
same
Free.
song? Yeah, it was.
I'm Breaking Free, the one, the hit.
That's really funny.
But I was always there was always like kind of like a thing that I was like the girl that like can sing or whatever. And then I think in middle school, drama class was my way of like kind of staying connected to music and arts and whatever. And then I think like in high school, it was like it was just overwhelmingly like big. It was like 3,000 freaking kids. And when I auditioned for X Factor, people were like, we didn't even know like you sang. Like it wasn't, I don't know. I think I reverted back to some of that shyness in high school, but I think definitely like auditioning for X Factor was kind of a surprise to a lot of people, including my family, because I wasn't really doing a lot of things professionally. Like not even doing a lot of things professionally, but I wasn't even doing a lot of things like,
Publicly.
Publicly, like
Yeah.
having the main part in like the school musical or this or that. The most I was doing was I would be singing a lot in like my house, like when my like parents weren't there. That's like all I would be doing. I was a really big fan, like music fan. I was a big fan of Bieber, of Taylor, of like a big pop culture fan. So that was like a big kind of part of my life.
You were like,
15.
15.
14.
So 14 years old, you have there's a 4-year-old in the house also while you're singing around.
Yeah.
Could you judge? Do you have a relationship with your sibling enough that you could like perform for your 4-year-old or 5-year-old sibling? Was it like
No.
that? Or was it like, oh my God, this is another part of my life and I'm 15 and 14. I'm worried about myself.
No, I mean, my sister, like, I feel like in the last few years, it's so interesting because like now I'll be like, Sophie, like, what do you think would be like a good like TikTok for this song?
Yeah.
Or, like now I feel like she's actually like, she's so helpful and gives me such a like refreshing perspective on like culture and like, culture in all kinds of ways, like whether it's like TikTok or social media or like music or whatever. But back then it was like, she was just a baby. Like she was like, just like my other, she was like a child, like a little.
Yeah,
Child.
like a literal. When you
literal child.